is there are a couple cars that are not safe enough to search. We know that there's nobody alive in them.
So the trains, a lot of them were tipped over on their side, or, and some of them, the roofs had been ripped off or collapsed in.
With this strategy, we are calling for a great reawakening of America, a resurgence of confidence, and a rebirth of patriotism, prosperity, and pride.
This is a tax cut. If you're a family of four making $55,000, you pay zero in federal tax. This is an advantage for all of America to get strong.
New York City for you there. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Tuesday morning. Let's get straight to a Fox News alert for you, though. Horrifying news yesterday. The Amtrak passenger train that derailed in Washington State, plummeting onto a highway below, and it was speeding. We know that. At least 3 people dead at this hour as the FBI combs through the horrifying scene, hunting for some new clues. That is where we find Claudia Cowan. She's live for us in DuPont with some new breaking developments from overnight. Good morning, Claudia.
And good morning to you, Heather. That's right. Investigators with the NTSB, that's the National Transportation Safety Board, arrived here overnight and will spend their first full day combing through the wreckage here to try to determine why 12 passenger cars and a locomotive jumped the track. Some of those cars landing on the busy freeway below. You can see the wreckage is still here, and that one train car just dangling over the trestle there. And while it will take months, maybe up to a year, to determine an official cause, no question this train was just going too fast. Using data recorder information, federal investigators confirmed the train was traveling 80 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, so 50 over the speed limit when it derailed. And now we're getting to hear those chilling first moments after the crash when the conductor called in to report it.
Amtrak 501, emergency. We are on the ground. We are on the bridge 5 at the swing.
That'll do. Easy stop, tackle.
On the freeway. Need EMS ASAP. It looks like they're already starting to show up.
The derailment left 3 people dead. It is unclear if their bodies are still in the mangled wreckage. 72 victims were treated at nearby hospitals, 10 listed in serious condition. But we're hearing amazing survival stories, too. For instance, a baby on the train escaped unhurt. And many of the survivors are praising bystanders who rushed in to help. One Good Samaritan had training as an Eagle Scout. Another was a neurosurgeon. Dozens of volunteers from a nearby military base also responded and helped save lives. President Trump is expressing his condolences and saying this accident, quote, shows more than ever why our soon-to-be submitted infrastructure plan must be approved quickly. Though the Associated Press is reporting this derailment happened on newly finished track, not a railway plagued with maintenance problems. Still, over the past few weeks, local officials had expressed their concerns about this brand new passenger line going so fast and so close to traffic and pedestrians. Back here live, you can see heavy cranes are being used to lift cars and semi-trucks out of the way so they can get this busy stretch of southbound Interstate 5 back open. I can tell you there were delays yesterday as we were arriving on site for many, many hours, and this is a main artery between Canada and Mexico, in fact, and because this freeway has been shut down, the governor has declared a state of emergency, so they are hoping to get this part of the freeway open later today. And the investigation continues, Heather.
Yeah, a lot of questions remain, especially since that ribbon cutting for that train was just on Friday. Claudia Cowan live for us from the scene. Thank you, Claudia. Well, America is going to win. That is a quote, and it's from President Trump unveiling his first national security strategy, highlighting his accomplishments in office and fulfilling his promise to put America first.
We have dealt ISIS one devastating defeat after another. Our campaign of maximum pressure on the North Korean regime has resulted in the toughest ever sanctions. With this strategy, we are calling for a great reawakening of America, a resurgence of confidence, and a rebirth of patriotism, prosperity, and pride.
Well, the 4 principles of the president's strategy: restricting immigration, pressuring trade partners, building up the military, and increasing the United States' global influence. The strategy also highlights Russia and China as rivals and challenges North Korea and Iran's nuclear weapons programs. We'll talk more about this a little bit later. In the meantime, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe coming face-to-face with the House Intelligence Committee today. At the closed-door meeting, expected to focus on former top FBI agent Peter Strzok's apparent anti-Trump bias and his role in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley now calling for McCabe's removal. Grassley claims that he is biased after his wife ran for a Virginia state Senate seat, financially backed by Clinton associates. The Senate Intelligence Committee just postponed its meeting with demoted Department of Justice official Bruce Ohr about his ties to Fusion GPS after some brand new documents surfaced related to the hearing. That meeting now expected to happen later this week. Also happening this week, historic tax reform on the horizon. The GOP poised to pass President Trump's tax bill today. And Griff Jenkins live in Washington, D.C. with what we can expect. Griff, it seems the countdown for this to happen has been going on for a while.
Hey, Heather, good morning. We're at the finish line. Christmas comes early for the Trump administration, and they would argue for the rest of the country, as later today the House and the Senate will both vote on the historic tax bill, with leaders like the House's Kevin McCarthy optimistic and traditional Senate holdouts like Susan Collins on board.
Is a tax cut. If you're a family of four making $55,000, you pay zero in federal tax. This is an advantage for all of America to get stronger and more competitive.
This legislation will provide tax relief to working families.
Now, there was concern the bill was in jeopardy in the Senate with Senator John McCain recovering in Arizona, which allowed them only one defection. But so far, there is only one defection, it appears, Arizona's other Senator, Jeff Flake.
Still looking at the bill, still reading the bill. I'm still working on some other issues.
And they've got the votes in the House to clear through, although some members from high tax states like New York oppose it. Here's Dan Donovan.
I'm still going to be a no. The changes in the SALT deduction actually don't satisfy the needs of the people that I represent. It's still a bill that's going to give tax relief to other parts of America on the backs of New Yorkers. And so I'm still going to vote no.
And no Democrats will vote for it. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi calls it, quote, a GOP tax scam that is a Frankenstein's monster of giveaways to the wealthy. But just to be safe, Vice President Pence has postponed a trip to Israel to be on hand in case he needs to break a tie in that Senate vote. And of course, this as they've got to do one more thing as well besides tax, and that is the shutdown looms with the Friday deadline. But most say on Capitol Hill that they'll at least get a temporary bill passed, Heather, and punt to January.
All that punting always happens. They're good punters, though. I'll give them that. Thank you so much, Griff. Have a great day. Well, Democrats, in the meantime, have been fighting the Republican tax overhaul by labeling it as a payout for America's wealthiest.
A tax reform bill is a disaster.
They keep pushing it because it's a payoff to their big donors.
The bills in the House and the Senate really are disgraceful.
But Javier Palomares, president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, says that it's shameful that the left is letting politics get in the way of relief for hardworking Americans.
When we look at economic growth at 3%, that is obviously great news for American business. When we look at the potential to finally passing critically needed tax reform. Keep in mind, we haven't seen meaningful tax reform since 1986. So our American small businesses desperately need the help, and we're thrilled that it looks like it might happen. It's American small business that's driving economic growth. We're creating 2/3 of all new jobs in this country, and we need tax reform. I want to urge all of our friends in the Congress to fight, the urge to let perfect become the enemy of good. This is a good tax bill. This is good for American business, it's good for the American economy, and it's good for the American people. We need to get behind this thing.
Well, Democrats plan to stand side to side with faith leaders and health advocates later this morning to rail against today's vote. And we'll be following that very closely. In other news for you, a man arrested after ramming his car through a gate at an airbase in Britain. A checkpoint security guards opening fire after their warnings were ignored. The man's car coming to a stop near a plane at the Mildenhall Air Base, which is used by the United States Air Force. His motive not clear at this hour, but authorities say that this is being treated as trespass, not terrorism. Well, trying to help ISIS just landed an Iraqi refugee 16 years behind bars. Authorities say that Omar Faraj Saeed al-Hardin wanted to leave the U.S. and join the terror group as a soldier and a bomb maker. He confessed his plot to blow up 2 Houston malls with a bomb detonated by a cell phone back in 2014. The 25-year-old was granted legal permanent residence in the U.S. back in 2011. He's also accused of coordinating weapons training with another Iraqi refugee in California who planned to fight for ISIS in Syria. While you were sleeping, the U.S. confirming that North Korea was the mastermind behind that largest ransomware cyber attack in history. Do you remember it? Well, the Wall Street Journal reports that the communist country pulled off the worldwide WannaCry hack earlier this year. That attack kidnapped 230,000 computers, including those at hospitals in 150 countries. It also caused more than $4 billion worth of damages. Very big. North Korea, they say, responsible. Well, delays stretching into another day, not entirely unexpected after that crippling blackout at the world's busiest airport. Some new video shows the extent of the electrical fire damage that left Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta in the dark for nearly 11 hours. Crews are still working to try to make those repairs. In all, more than 1,400 flights were canceled, leaving thousands of passengers stranded right before, of course, the busiest holiday travel weekend of the year. We're going to get that back on track. Speaking of getting back on track, John McCain appears to be in good spirits, saying that he will be back on Capitol Hill very soon. The 6th-term Arizona senator tweeting this, quote, "Thanks to everyone for your support and words of encouragement. I'm feeling well and looking forward to returning to work after the holidays." That's certainly good news to hear. The 81-year-old was hospitalized last week for a viral infection while he continues to battle brain cancer. He is expected, though, to miss today's historic vote on tax reform. Our prayers are with him and his family. The time now is about 12 minutes after the top of the hour. President Trump telling the world it is game on.
With the strategy I am announcing today, we are declaring that America is in the game and America is going to win.
Our next guest was there for his historic speech and says that it was one of his most personal ones yet. Plus, liberal comedian Sara Silverman taking a huge swipe at the right, why she says that patriotism is perverted. The outrageous comments coming up, and a holiday headache in the making, the record number of people hitting the road for Christmas. Well, President Trump unveiling his national security strategy, stressing American strength and economic security and putting rivals like China and Russia on notice. So what message is he sending to the rest of the world? Retired U.S. Navy Captain and Director of Advocacy and Policy at the Independence Fund, Bob Kerrey, was actually at the president's address, and he joins us now live with some of his perspective. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
Let's begin by going over the 4 principles that were in the national security strategy. Number 1, protecting the homeland, advancing American prosperity, preserving peace through strength, and enhancing American influence. So amongst those 4, do you consider one more important than the other?
Peace through strength, I think, is probably the most important, because you cannot advance your national security interests if you don't have the capacity to do so. And the fact of the matter is that our military has been gutted over the last 10 years, totally underfunded, and is unable to be able to reach out and do what we need it to do because it's stretched too thin and stretched too far.
So this particular strategy, it's a marked departure, you say, if not a complete reversal altogether. How?
It is. It is. The previous administration looked at the world in terms of a rules-based international order, and that we needed to subvert our own national security interests to those of the broader international community. The Trump administration has pretty clearly said that they think that's sort of fanciful, and that power really derives from strength and from individual nation states, and that we should build our national security strategy off of both of those.
Yeah, and also that goes along with something that he basically called out, that there are no rules in the international order as well.
Exactly. And the previous administration thought that they could impose some type of international democratic norm that everyone would abide by. And I think a lot of the problems we experienced were because of that sort of fanciful unicorn-type approach towards international security.
Yeah, and as a result of some of that, we have some of the threats that we're facing today, and focusing on the America First idea goes along with eliminating the North Korea threat, promoting fair trade with China and Russia, and then along with immigration, chain migration crackdown.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
No, and all these things are a marked departure from the previous administration and even from the Bush 43 administration. And I think really highlight that this president has invested personally in this national security strategy. I don't know of any other president that's made a rollout speech like this about their national security strategy, and I think that he is personally invested in it and has brought over the principles from his campaign and to what he thinks the United States should be in the world arena.
Yeah. And what about the terminology that he used as well? That alone was different.
It is. The fact that he used radical Islamic terrorism, that he talked about nation states being the underpinning of international security and order. Those are marked departures from previous administration and frankly from the foreign policy community in Washington, D.C., from sort of their norm of everything that we've done so far needs to be perpetuated.
Yeah, being PC. For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, but instead he says, America first, protect us here in the homeland. Thank you so much for joining us, Bob. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day. Well, the time now is about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. Fox News alert for you. Muslims will return to being masters of the world. That's a quote, and it's a threat from ISIS as they take aim at the U.S. Army and their families. The terrifying new plot just uncovered. Plus, the bomb McCabe facing the House Intel Committee today amid some new calls for his removal. This, as the credibility of Robert Mueller's Russia collusion case is called into question once again. The Trump transition team saying that the special counsel improperly obtained thousands of documents illegally. So what does that mean, and are criminal charges possible? Here to discuss is Todd Pirro, who's Fox and Friends correspondent, also a lawyer.
I'm going to put the legal hat on today.
Yes, so you're going to answer all of these questions for us and tell us what is going on here specifically. Just begin from the start.
At its core, this is a battle between the Trump transition team, who says these are our documents, they shouldn't have just been given out, versus the Bob Mueller team and the General Services Administration, who argue that anything, like you said, that ends in a .gov is property of the government. They can do whatever they want with it.
So you just go in and say, hey, I want these, or not even ask,
not
just
even
take
ask.
them. Okay.
What makes this situation so intriguing is this timeline that exists in this situation. There's an individual, his name, I'm going to make sure I get it right, Richard Beckler. He was the general counsel for the General Services Administration. According to the Trump transition team members, there was an agreement that if any request was made by the government for any of these Trump transition team emails, documents, whatever, that Beckler and his GSA would give the Trump transition team a heads up, say, hey, you know, these have been requested. If you want to fight it, you go fight it. That gentleman actually passed away. And in I believe, June, and then in August of 2017, August of this year, there was an actual letter, not a subpoena, from GSA, or to GSA, from the Mueller team. And the GSA was just like, okay, here you go. Here are all the documents. And
so did someone replace this Beckler individual?
It wasn't a replacing necessarily. It was a guy that was under him who sort of took the lead. It was a career individual there at the GSA.
So he started skipping the step of informing the Trump transition team.
Sure. And as a result, we have this letter from the Trump transition team lawyer that says, this is a violation. We didn't get a chance to look at these documents, make sure that there were no privileged documents in there. And as a result, what I anticipate is that this is going to end up in a court. And the argument that the Trump transition team people are going to make is that anything that you acquired vis-a-vis these documents, anything that these documents led to in terms of an interrogation, an interview of anybody else, is what's called fruit of the poisonous tree, meaning you can't use it in any subsequent prosecution, i.e. in the Mueller investigation. Obviously, the Mueller team is going to say, it ends in a .gov, no expectation of privacy. We have it. We can use it.
So they'll try to argue that this was just a agreement, not a legal necessity. is what the Mueller team will try to say.
I've read that they're not even going to say there was any agreement, any meeting of the minds there. So I have a hunch this is going to end up in a court of law.
Yeah. All right. Well, a lot of things ending up in courts of law these days. All right, Todd, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll see what happens. Well, coming up in the next half hour, it turns out that the Obama administration undermined the U.S. government. This is huge. To protect the Iran nuclear deal, that stunning new report that was just revealed, former State Department officer Morgan Ortega, she joins us, and she says that Congress needs to get to the bottom of this. She's up next. Plus,
I was just on the floor like a pinball, and everything on that car was rubble.
People started flying towards me.
It sort of felt like war.
back with the Fox News alert. The Amtrak passenger train that derailed in Washington state was speeding before it plummeted onto a highway below. You're looking at some live shots right there. This is a DuPont where right now the FBI, the NTSB, they're all on the scene, combing through the horrific crash that has left at least three people dead, nearly 100 others injured. The train was going over 80 miles per hour just moments before the steep curve where that speed limit right there is actually only 30 miles per hour. It then fell off the tracks, sending rail cars crashing, falling over like dominoes. It was the Amtrak train's first trip on the new route designed to speed up travel in the Northwest. So the investigation continues. Well, your sons will return to you in coffins. A sick new quote, a threat from ISIS targeting the U.S. Army and State Department. In the disgusting new propaganda video, the terror group claims that it hacked into our government systems, obtaining addresses, vowing to send assassins to employees' homes. With scenes of war, bombings, and terror attacks playing in the background, the footage also declares Muslims will return to being masters of the world. And the first ever U.S. police officer convicted of trying to help ISIS now faces up to 60 years behind bars. A former D.C. transit officer, Nicholas Young, you see him there, he allegedly sent undercover FBI agents posing as ISIS hundreds of dollars in gift cards to fund messaging accounts used for recruitment. Young also telling an ISIS recruit how to travel overseas undetected. He had been on officials' radar since 2010, and then he was arrested in 2016. To Charlottesville, the Charlottesville police chief is stepping down just weeks after a scathing report on how his department handled the deadly August riots. Alfred Thomas faced months of criticism after an independent report called his response to the white supremacist rally, quote, slow-footed. James Alex Fields is charged with first-degree murder after allegedly driving his car into a crowd of protesters, killing one person. And here's a big story today. A scathing new report now accusing the Obama administration of undermining an elaborate DEA operation aimed at taking down Hezbollah's drug trafficking network, all in an effort to ultimately secure the 2015 Iran deal. Here now to react is former financial intel analyst for the Treasury Department who worked to publicly designate individual terrorists for the United Nations, Morgan Ortega. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So to break this down for people, this was called Project Cassandra. And what it did, it allowed the DEA to get evidence that the terrorist group was actually amassing, $1 billion in drugs and weapons. But then when they wanted to do something about it, the brakes were pulled, basically.
And according to the report, it wasn't also just the DEA. It was actually over 30 different intel agencies that were a part of the U.S. government and our allies working together on this. So this was a project that spanned over many years of the Obama administration. Remember, Heather, that Hezbollah is an Iranian-backed Shia terrorist organization, and they're wreaking havoc around the world in the Middle East. But just in June of this year, U.S. authorities, federal authorities, arrested Hezbollah agents for looking to potentially attack the United States. So Hezbollah is a terrorist group that has been a menace in the region for a long time, but they're incredibly well funded, not only by the Iranians, but by the fact that they're able to traffic drugs, theft, money laundering all around the world to fill their coffers.
So all of this money coming into them, why in the world would the brakes be pulled on all these organizations, not just the DEA? And how would it tie in to the success or failure of the Iran deal?
So in the Politico report, it was not just a few disgruntled DEA agents that came forward. The Politico author said that he interviewed dozens of people who were a part of this. So it was very extensive research. And while they didn't offer explicit proof that the Obama administration politically stopped these prosecutions, a former Treasury official, Catherine Bauer, testified before Congress that these prosecutions were slowed down in order to make room for the Iran deal. Now, this isn't the first allegation against the Obama administration that they were doing things to placate the Iranians in order to get the deal through. But this is the first time where we've seen dozens of former federal intelligence analysts coming forward to say this was politically motivated to stop the research that we were doing to stop a terrorist group worldwide.
Yeah, a lot of people very upset about this report. We have a statement from Congressman Pittenger. He had this to say. He said, these revelations are shocking and infuriating. While American soldiers were bravely fighting ISIS terrorists, with some paying the ultimate price, the Obama administration reportedly was protecting Hezbollah terrorists who were funding themselves by trafficking illegal drugs. No wonder President Obama couldn't bring himself to call them radical Islamist terrorists.
Yeah, and I think the nuance that the congressman doesn't get right is that ISIS is a Sunni group and the Hezbollah is Shia. So these are two very different factions. Hezbollah is fighting in Syria, and so you have hardened Shia, Iranian-backed Hezbollah fighters that are coming off the battlefield that could potentially continue to wreak havoc in the Middle East. They could attack here. And so what does the administration need to do going forward? Ted Cruz also called for congressional investigations in this. I think former CIA Director John Brennan needs to go before Congress and testify because he was part of this bigger
with the ultimate result being possibly what? I mean, what can happen now that this has already occurred?
Well, what can happen now is that the Trump administration can put a new focus on Hezbollah. The Trump administration has a new focus to counter Iran, a new strategy for the Middle East. And so I believe that the Trump administration, I'm sure they're probably starting to do this, should put an interagency task force back together to target Hezbollah, to go after their financing, to go after the money laundering, and how they're trafficking, cocaine allegedly into the United States.
It makes no sense at all.
Very elaborate.
Really all right. Thank you so much for Morgan. We appreciate you joining us. Big topic.
Thanks, Heather.
Well, defying the Trump administration, a judge ruling that 2 illegal immigrants must be allowed to get abortions. How the White House is now responding to that. And the collusion tables have turned. Remember when Green candidate Jill Stein dined with Russian President Vladimir Putin? Congress does, and now they want some answers to Fox and Friends First. The Trump administration now taking its battle over illegal immigration and teen abortion to the Supreme Court. This after a federal judge ruled that 2 pregnant immigrant teens who entered the country illegally must be allowed to undergo the procedure. Now, the girls, who are in federal custody in different states, they arrived as unaccompanied minors. We'll have more on that. If you cannot play for them, how about buying them? Colin Kaepernick wants in with Diddy to buy the Carolina Panthers. The hip-hop mogul tweeted that he wanted to buy the team, and then Kaepernick chimed in, quote, saying, I want in on the champion or on the ownership group. Let's make it happen. Diddy says that he would sign the disgraced quarterback if he owned the team, despite the Panthers already having former MVP Cam Newton. Owner Jerry Richardson is selling the team after being accused of workplace misconduct. And a Fox News alert for you. Are you tired of winning yet? Well, the Dow...
We're going to have win after win after win. You people are going to get sick and tired of winning.
Yeah, the Dow there just broke another record. Tracy Crosco from our sister network, Fox Business, here with the numbers. Winning, 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 Tracy.
Yes, good morning, Heather. So we did just break another record on Wall Street yesterday. For the first time ever, the Dow has climbed more than 5,000 points. Yesterday, here's how we ended the day, up 140 points to close the day at 24,792. Can you see that? We are getting very close to 25,000. And it wasn't just that long ago that we reached 24,000. So we've reached a lot of milestones this year, capping off a really great year on Wall Street. A lot of this has been fueled by the optimism of tax reform. This latest surge, of course, coming from that optimism. And then we are expecting expected to see a vote, which is really propelling the markets.
Yeah, it should happen today, that vote.
Yes.
We'll see. And then a record number of people traveling for the holidays this year. We seem to hear this every year.
Yes, and this year AAA is saying that the number of people traveling is up about 3%, but in total, by plane, by automobile, by train, 107.3 million people will be traveling from December 23rd through January 1st. Most of those people, though, will be traveling by vehicle, so they'll be driving somewhere.
So perhaps another indication that people are feeling confident about the economy, right?
Yes, absolutely. Strong economy, lower gas prices, a lot of that, fueling people driving.
Well, if you're traveling, you're driving, you can stop off at Dunkin' Donuts and get a beer?
Well, this not quite.
Okay.
So Dunkin' Donuts has teamed up with a brewery in Massachusetts, and they've created a stout. It's called DD Dark Roasted Brew. It's the first ever beer to be made, obviously using the Dunkin' Donuts chain, their coffee beans. So you have to go to this brewery, and it's called Wormtown Brewery. It's in Massachusetts, and this beer will be served on the winter solstice, December 21st, and proceeds, both Dunkin' and the brewery will be donating $11,500 to a local food bank. So you can drink it for a good cause.
So you can't just pull up to a Dunkin'.
Unfortunately not.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Tracy.
Thanks, Heather.
Well, the time now is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour. Liberal comedian Sara Silverman taking a huge swipe at the right while she says that patriotism is perverted. Yeah. And Christmas 6 days away, still not done.